recording. And then I will go ahead and share screen. Let's see. Okay, so welcome one and all to the Florida Civic Advance webinar series. This is, we're going on in, the series started back in 2022, and we're anticipating a number of programs in the calendar year 2024. So the program today, I'm honored to say that is we're looking at engaging youth in civic health. We've done a couple of webinars in 23 that featured the University of Florida and 4-H, as well as the YMCA and the University of South Florida. And this is a program that we'll be looking at today from Stetson Law. And both Christine and Judith are going to describe the program and provide both background and the context for this. And Emery Ivory is going to moderate that. And just as a quick housekeeping note, please place your devices on mute until the Q&A, which we'll hopefully have about 15 minutes at the back end of the program. Just a reminder that we conduct nonpartisan webinars. Hopefully, this goes without saying. Please show respect for the speakers and each other. One of the things that you can utilize is the chat function to share questions. We'll try and be responding to those questions as we go through, but you can also provide those at the end as well. Comments as well as links to resources. I think, as I just mentioned, we're going to have an open Q&A after the presentations. So I'll start off just really briefly with an introduction to Florida Civic Advance and our mission, which is to advance the civic health in Florida's communities. And civic health reflects the opportunities people have to participate in their communities. And when you have strong indicators of civic health in a community, these are basically the research has been able to demonstrate that they have accessible civic gathering places and libraries and places, stronger schools, higher employment rates, better individual physical health, and one real interesting fact is they live about 10 years longer in civically healthy communities as opposed to civically unhealthy communities. So Florida, the civic health challenge for Florida is we're a large state. We are the third largest state in the country in terms of population, but one of the lowest states in terms of our civic health. And the Florida Civic Advance wants to change that. You can see these statistics, which I'll point out are mostly in the mid part of the last decade, 2015, 2013, 2015. And these are not where we want to be. These are we want to be in the top quartile at least, but we're 50th, 49th, 50th, 50th. That is a sobering account, but I think there is perhaps a lot of activity that's not captured by some of the civic health index measurements that we're hoping to kind of uncover and be able to share. This is just a brief infographic on the Florida Civic Advance and our framework for 23 to 25. 3-year effort, and in particular, we're going to be trying to help support civic health measurement and community measurement, to and also convene and showcase civic excellence. And these webinars are one of the ways in which we do that. So I'm going to go to this slide, but then I'm going to briefly say what you wanted to learn based on the registration, and then come back to this slide and let Emery both moderate and introduce the speakers. And so here's a slide that was extracted from the things that you said, that each of the registrants said they wanted to learn. In terms of the who, obviously Stetson Law and its program, as well as the Youth Civic Engagement Program, and we're going to go deeply into that in this webinar. I want to hear about how other communities and efforts are going to engage youth. Wanted to know whether data has been collected from the participants following programs, civic programs in schools, the level of understanding, civic understanding of students, and then any challenges in engaging in terms of the context of youth civic engagement. And then there are a number of so how can you connect the program to civic engagement activities locally in St. Pete and Gulfport? How do you engage young people with voting? How do you get youth to engage in the community? What kind of partnership opportunities might be available for the Stetson Law Program and other programs, either in the region, locally, or even statewide? And how to provide equitable education for students. So these were the thoughts that were offered. And I will then turn it over to Emery to introduce the presenters and himself, and we'll go from there.
All right. Thank you, Bob. And thank you also for the information on FCA and some of the data that you presented. And I think it really sets the stage for this presentation and why engaging youth in civic health is so very important. It is a pleasure for me to introduce our presenters, both of whom bring a wealth of talent and expertise to this topic of youth civic engagement. First, we have Christine Cerniglia, who is Professor and Director of Clinical Education at Stetson University College of Law. She began her teaching career as a visiting professor at Stetson and then accepted a director position at Atlanta's John Marshall Law School. She then returned to New Orleans in, or did I pronounce that right, as New Orleans? So she returned to New Orleans in 2012 in a newly labeled academic position as Director of Skills and Experiential Education at Loyola College of Law. And this was to help transform Loyola's skills curriculum, where she designed practice tracks, which are still part of their curricular offerings. She joined Stetson College of Law in 2017 in the role of Director of Clinical and Experiential Education to build upon the long history of clinical training at Florida's first law school. And while at Stetson, she created a new course entitled Disaster Law Primer, an externship in COVID-19 and the impact on the civil system. Before her academic career, she practiced law in New Orleans. So thank you for joining us, Christine. And then next we have Judith Scully, who is professor also at Stetson University College of Law, and is the founder of the Social Justice Advocacy Concentration. She has been a law professor since 1996. She joined the Stetson University College of Law in 2009 as a tenured full professor. From August 2011 until May 2017, she served as the William Reese Smith Distinguished Professor of Law for the purpose of developing public service pro bono and professionalism programs for Stetson Law Schools students, excuse me. For several years, she directed the Stetson Law School Innocence Initiative, which focused on the representation of individuals who are wrongfully convicted and incarcerated. She is the founder and co-director of Stetson Law School's Social Justice Advocacy Concentration Program and the Alliance for Advocacy and Philanthropy. She currently co-chairs the St. Petersburg Higher Education for Racial Equity Consortium and was a founding co-chair of Florida Law School's Consortium on Racial Justice from 2020 to 2022. And then prior to teaching, she managed her own law firm in the city of Chicago. Welcome and thank you again both for joining us. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Emery and Bob, for inviting us. And I think Christine is about to share her screen. So we have a brief PowerPoint as well that will help us walk through the Youth Civic Engagement program that we are hosting at Stetson Law School, that we've been hosting actually for the last 3 years. So we can go to the next slide, Christine, if we can.
Can you see it?
I can see the first, yes, there we go. So we wanted to start out just with a brief introduction of Stetson in general. As was mentioned earlier, we are the first law school in the state of Florida. We were founded about 1900. We have a reputation for being the #1 law school in trial advocacy and the #3 law school in legal research and writing. And as Emery said during our introduction, we also have a social justice advocacy concentration program that helps to funnel public interest students into careers that are flourishing and will help with the civic environment wherever they are. We are located in Gulfport, but we also have another campus in downtown Tampa as well.
Our student demographics, we have a total of 760 total full-time JD students, 168 part-time, and hopefully a growing part-time program. 5 LLM students in international law, 15 in elder law, and 17 in advocacy. Those are all LLM advanced. They're earning an advanced degree. I think we represent close to 85 different undergrad institutions that the students are coming from. So pretty prolific as far as our outreach and student demographics, but predominantly a Florida school. Our employment statistics are always very strong. We're always proud of those. Most of our students graduate and they end up in kind of a mid-sized to large law firm, or you can see government and public interest. This is all public data that's shared on our website, and you can, the American Bar Association requires us to share this. But you can see most of our students actually take the Florida Bar. So we have a very strong Florida Bar test-taking constituency. So a lot of our students are from here or stay here. And that gives us a little bit about ourselves, but I turn it over to Judy to kind of introduce why we're here today, which is our pride and joy of the Summer Youth Civics program and how it started. Or Emery might have a question for us.
Oh, do you have a question for us, Emery?
No.
No, okay.
No, I'm good.
All right, so I will jump in and just say that our Summer Youth Civic program started in the summer of 2020. And I'm sure most of you will recall that 2020 was a turbulent time, not just because of the pandemic, but because of all of the focus on racism and policing in the United States, right? This became a topic of international concern. It wasn't just national. And during that time period, I think many universities as well as corporate entities began to examine what could they do to really educate people about the different racial inequities that exist in our society, but also what can we do to help balance the scales related to racial equity. And so this program was really born out of a sentiment from our dean at the time that we needed to have a pipeline program, a program that would really help feed students who are underrepresented in the legal profession, feed them into a law school process. And so our Summer Youth Civic program was our attempt to really reach out to students in the south side of St. Petersburg, as well as the surrounding areas, but to really touch base with students who are underrepresented in the legal profession. And so we're viewing this as their introduction to law school, but also their introduction, obviously, to civic engagement. How can they actually learn about not just being a legal advocate, but being an advocate in general for the community? And so that's really how our program started.
If we were to define our mission and goals, I would say they've kind of pivoted over time. In the summer of 2020, as Judy said, we really had a dean who strongly urged us to create a pipeline program so that we could increase diversity in our classrooms and really have more outreach from a law school for civic advancement. We've developed the goals and objectives for our program and continue to kind of pivot and think about the need for it and really the urgency. We're now post affirmative action, and there is, I'm going to call it, a dire need for more leaning in and explicit advancing of diversity to enrich our classrooms. And then equally, civic engagement, as we all know, is one that our country can benefit from. And so understanding, I think, the youth, we put together a curriculum that really put together also an assessment plan of existing youth civic programs and really focusing on youth advocacy and movement lawyering and really inspiring them to advocate in their own communities. And then training them really from a youth teaching opportunities and training them how to advocate. And then kind of a larger sense of well-being, of being engaged, just as Bob kind of pointed out, right? You have better health if you're engaged, your well-being is better, and feeling like you belong. I think that has been one of the most important goals of the program as well. They're all important, but that's one.
Right, and just for background, I saw in the chat a question about what age group are we reaching out to. Our students are primarily high school students between the ages of 15 and 17. And on average, we are recruiting about 25 students per year. So this is, we just finished our third year, our third cohort. So there's about 25 students per year that will join us in the Summer Civics program.
The curriculum spans over a week, and we had started with the intent of kind of an in-person curriculum where they would come onto the law school campus, but as you know, the pandemic has impacted all of us, so we have modified, but it kind of walks through several different opportunities. The first day, we always start with an opening and a welcoming, really to get each other comfortable with kind of open dialogue and a fierce commitment to facilitating conversations, not us just talking at you. And so we start with kind of rules to engage, especially in an online space. We want to make sure that the students understand what respectful dialogue and civic dialogue feels and looks like, and understanding mindfulness and listening, active listening skills. I teach these two modules, the mindfulness, listening, and civil dialogue, and then I teach the self and society, where we place students in a fictitious island and we put them in breakout rooms and they have to create their own laws and determine what laws have priority and values and why they're going to implement those laws. So that's the first day. We're already kind of engaging them in how to think about society and their role in society and how laws are formed. The second day, we have really a dedicated space for human rights and global citizenship, where we focus on the International Declaration of Human Rights, and we take one aspect of human rights. We'll bring in guest speakers who are advocates for human rights so they can tell their story. And then there's usually a community engagement activity that our law students actually plan. And it usually is something around helping them to understand how to engage or to think about their space from their own perspective.
And can I just add one thing, Chrissy, in terms of how important it is for the high school students to be interacting with law students as well. It's one of the things that they say really helps them to be able to imagine themselves in the future as well, right? We have sure, we as professors are there, but I think it's really great to have students who are closer in age to the high school students than we are, really teaching them and guiding them as well. So it's an important
I've
component of our program.
law students come back and say, this is the best thing I ever did in law school.
Yeah, that's
And so it's a complimentary experience. Yeah. Okay, so in continuing, this is really Judy's moment for the next 2 days. She takes over and teaches advocacy. So I'll pass the baton back to you, Judy.
okay, and so we have a two-part session that covers advocacy, activism, and social change. And during these two workshops, I really try to focus on teaching the students about advocacy in general, like what is self-advocacy? How do you advocate for yourself? I always say to them, as a child in a family, right? You are always advocating for yourself. You want to go to a party, you want to participate in extracurricular activities. You have to convince your parents that this is a good way to go. That's advocacy. And so they're able to envision themselves at the very basic level of being an advocate. And then we talk about how they can also advocate for others. It doesn't always have to be on behalf of themselves. And that as they grow, they'll become able to advocate from a community level as well. Like, how do we advocate on behalf of a group of students or a group of our peers as opposed to just one individual that we may be helping? And then we take it to the furthest extent, which is systemic advocacy. And we talk about how social change actually occurs, how it's important to have key stakeholders involved in any organizing effort if you want to see systemic change. So for example, students have said in the past that they were concerned about how the school resource officers interacted with students. And so we have a conversation about what would systemic advocacy look like there. You would have to involve the students, the teachers, the parents, also possibly some of the judges who may be involved in cases that may come out of interactions with school resource officers. So we talk about self-advocacy, individual advocacy, community advocacy, and systemic advocacy. We also spend quite a bit of time talking about legal advocacy, but I make it really clear that you don't need to be a lawyer to be an advocate, right? And so we talk about as well how teenagers can be advocates on a much broader basis. We give them examples historically from the civil rights movement of students who were involved, for example, in the Children's March in Birmingham, how they stood up and filled the prisons in order to make sure that there was a highlight on the injustices that were taking place in Birmingham. We also talk about the students from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, who after the school shooting stood up to really speak out about gun control and how that happened. And we walk them through what it means to be an advocate in these different scenarios. We talk a little bit about the value of protesting, citizen protests, and why that's important when the law is not actually addressing issues of importance to a community. And then we give them examples of teenagers who are involved in international advocacy as well. As Chrissy indicated earlier, they are introduced to human rights documents and the international human rights apparatus through the United Nations. And so we talk about teenagers like Malala from Pakistan, who's an advocate in education, or Greta Thunberg, who's an advocate from Sweden who has brought climate change to the United Nations discussions as well. And there are several other examples that we use to explain to them that this isn't just necessarily a school issue or a local community issue. It can be a statewide issue, a national issue, and sometimes an international human rights issue as well. And so we wrap up our advocacy section with voting and the history of voting and why it is so important for them to understand this history, not just in terms of how certain segments of the population have been kept out of voting historically, but also for them to understand how powerful their own voting participation can be. So we focus on the power of the youth vote And we ultimately end with a section on how to register to vote. We let them know that at the age of 16, they can pre-register to vote. And many of our students in the program actually do pre-register before they graduate and receive their certificate from our program. So that's in a nutshell what we're doing in the workshop on advocacy, activism, and social change.
The last day, the first 2 year or the second year, I think we did a field trip to the courthouse. The third year we brought them to campus, but it usually entails an interaction with the judge. So they actually can now learn about courthouse procedures and process. They meet with attorneys who conduct a voir dire or show some portion of a trial, and have a mock trial so that they understand really the different lenses of each person in a courtroom and the process and the proceedings and the court's responsibility in kind of implementing those process and procedures. We've graciously had alums and judges volunteer to come speak and really connect to them. It's a great opportunity for them to feel the presence. We're lucky to have so many courtrooms on our campus, and so it was easy to bring them to our campus and literally position everybody in a courtroom. But we like bringing them to the actual courtroom in downtown St. Pete.
And prior to the courthouse, they also have an opportunity to actually argue a case. We divide the students up. They're given law student coaches, and they argue a case from both sides. So that seems to really light the students up as well. And I think it's a great prelude to the actual visit to the courthouse here.
When we brought them to the courthouse our second year, we also took them out to lunch. So we made them kind of ask them to dress up for the courthouse, and then we walked to lunch, and some of our alums met them at lunch, which is just a beautiful opportunity for everybody to connect over food, which I think is important. The other part that we wanted to kind of showcase to you are just kind of some data. This is from 2023. We've been collecting data for the past 3 years. I know some of you have asked about the data. It's in preparation for this, as well as applying for other grants to seek more money so that we can continue the program to the caliber we want to. We've actually taken a moment to step back and look at the data and are somewhat excited about it, but we're not statisticians. And so we're always looking for people to engage in our data to figure out a way that we can be rethinking our program. But in 2023, we had 24 high schools represented, Title I public schools, and then other schools, 31%. You'll see we did have some private and homeschooled students who participated in 2023. Somebody asked in the chat about the age, and you can see largely, 15 to 17-year-olds, a very young 14-year-old, but again, from 2023, that's our age span. Gender, and gender identity, we asked the question female, male, trans male, and trans female, and we think it's an important question to make sure that we are representative and inclusive. I think we could probably ask more questions to be more inclusive, but essentially pretty even, a little bit more females than males, and then our trans male and trans female equally, really powerful moments there for connections among each other. Race, equally an important aspect of our mission and our goal is, you can see overwhelmingly more students who identify as Black, African American. Judy and I were talking before this, how we are multi-ethnic, multiracial, and so some of these questions were like, wow, we could ask deeper questions about ethnicity and race to get a deeper understanding of who our students are, but you can see a little bit there. And then the experiences that we wanted to highlight or talk about are not only just from ourselves, but the students. And so I'll stop there because Judy really has a connection point, and we're going to play a video of a student in their own words, which we think is important.
Right. And so the feedback that we've received from our students really is that the program really emphasizes a sense of belonging for them. One of the things that we keep hearing from students in their evaluation is that it was really a eye-opening opportunity for them to connect with students from other schools and to recognize that they had common concerns. And it was an opportunity for them to expand their networks and to talk about what is happening at different schools throughout our region. So they really value the interaction with each other. I think they also really value, as Chrissy had mentioned earlier, the opportunity to actually be in a courtroom and to have hands-on experiences with not just professors, but lawyers and judges and law students as well. So that seems to be one of the biggest highlights for them. They love being in community with each other, and they also love arguing, right? They love to learn how to put together an argument and to present it. And I think, you know, the listening skills that Chrissy talked about earlier come in very handy throughout the entire process, because they are beginning to recognize that not everyone agrees on a topic, and that it's important to be respectful in terms of providing space for each other to hear each other out. So we have
Judy,
a video here of one of our graduates as well. Chrissy?
can I say one thing that I think I
Sure.
forgot to say? In one of the components that I teach logical syllogisms as well as logistical fallacies. And so we kind of introduce them to logic. And so when we talk about civil dialogue and constructing an argument, that's an important part that we kind of thread through. It's not a passionate argument, it's one based on logic. And then if you can find the faulty syllogism, that actually helps kind of arm them with kind of a very civil dialogue of why it's wrong. Okay, I say that, and then really hearing from our students, I think, is the best. So I'm going to play this short video.
My name is Jace Miller, and I am 15 years old, and I attend Hillsborough High School. I attended the Summer Civics program this past year, summer of 23. I found out about the program through my siblings who did it 2 years prior to when I joined, and my mom was a part of an organization where she heard about it through them. What I liked about the program was learning about different laws and engaging with the other students who attended the program, and experiencing what it's like to be in a real courtroom and learning the different aspects and different laws that you could potentially be in. The program impacted me because it inspired me to finish writing my book called The Legacy of Silence, A Haunted Truth, which goes through the themes of social injustice and advocacy, which was one of our segments during the Youth Civics program. My book is about how a teenage boy lost his life at the hands of a police officer, and the party goers who witnessed this did not speak up and did not seek justice until it was said that advocacy helps the non-silent. While in the program, I learned that advocacy gives a voice to the voiceless through different aspects of law, which plays a key role. Another thing that impacted me while writing my book from the Youth Civics program is the description of the courtroom in the book. While I was writing that chapter in my book, I pictured myself when we went in to the courtroom for the first time, and how we sat there and had a mock trial and seen what actually went on in the courtroom. Another part that I enjoyed throughout the program was when we were on Zoom and we argued a side of a case. The case that we did was Reading versus the school district, where a 13-year-old girl was distributing ibuprofen to her friends and was called to the office and she consented to a property search, which later on turned into a strip search that she did not consent to. And later it was found out that it was unconstitutional. I enjoyed that because I got to see both sides, which I argued for the school district while others argued in the favor of Reading. And also, I would like to say that I enjoyed the opportunity of being in the civics law program, and I would definitely do it again.
We didn't require our students to write a book. I just want to say that this student is exceptional. When we found out about it, we were like, what? She wrote a book. It's just one of those moments that is fantastic.
Yeah, it really is. And I also love that she said at the end, if I had the opportunity, I would do it again. We've had several students actually who have signed up for more than 1 year of the Youth Civics program. And I think it really is, as I said earlier, a part of them wanting to find a community to belong to, while they are thinking through what does advocacy and civic engagement mean. So we have a few quotes here from some of our students' written evaluations. One of them says, "I'm interested in this program because little things can make a big difference. Me contributing to the community would help out the people in need." So I love that they recognize the practical aspect of what we are trying to do in the program as well. Another student said, "I want to obtain leadership skills and become more active in my community. I also want to learn about civil rights and equal justice." So that, of course, warms my heart as the individual who is really focused on social justice and civil rights to hear that that impacted the students in this way, that they want to learn more. The third student said, "I'm interested in the program because as a young African-American teenager, I think it is important for me to understand the laws of our system and how they apply to the community around me. I believe everyone should be their own advocate, and it starts with learning as much as you can. Law and civics is a part of that. This can lead to actively participating in society." So these are the words of the students. We didn't ask them to say this. We didn't tell them what to say, but they were able to walk away from the program understanding what our key objectives were, and to really emphasize the fact that they're receiving what we are giving in this program, which is always very gratifying.
My perspective just from teaching in this program, I signed up for it, because the dean said, "Hey, I want to do this." And I literally said, "This is something that really would inspire me, or I think would be great. I believe in the cause." And I walked away as a professor, literally thinking, this next generation is fierce and they get it. They actually get it. And so understanding how we need to engage in a way that inspires and keeps up with their ability to advocate pushes me to be a better professor, a better teacher, a better human. And to me, that is selfishly reflective on me, but they're incredible. The students are absolutely incredible to engage with. And I think our law students felt the same way.
Yeah, I agree. They are really incredible. And one of the things that I think that we didn't mention that does need to be stated is that the program seems to also um, encourage them to think about empathy and to become more empathetic, right? Because they're listening to students who are from other schools having different kinds of issues. We also, as Chrissy mentioned earlier, we have had a couple of trans students in our program as well, and they've been very vocal about LGBTQ issues. And we've seen the students, the African-American students, really listening to the LGBTQ students, and you can see that cross-fertilization happening as well, that they are beginning to understand the connection between the different types of treatment that they may be receiving, how it may be similar, how it may be different as well. But you can definitely hear from the comments that they share with us that their level of empathy is growing through this program as well.
It feels like a place of empowerment, a safe place of empowerment for the students where they can connect to each other and they feel a sense of belonging, which is great. Statistically, the impact is something I think we're still trying to realize. We haven't necessarily followed all of our students. It's something that we would like to determine, and it would allow us to kind of have more clarity. But we have some statistics that are really important. And I think just in doing this presentation, we have sat back and looked at some of this. We can definitively say that there is an increase statistically that the students are able and more confident to present an argument. That they at the pre-program, they're asked these questions, and then post-program, we ask the same kind of questions. And this is one thing that kind of pops out, is that they're able and they feel more confidence in presenting an argument. And then equally, that they have more knowledge about advocating for themselves, and then equally advocating for others. We're seeing a statistical increase in that. Anywhere between, I would say, 6 to 20% increase is what we're noticing. Each and every year it differs, but at least we can say there's some positive impacts there from the data. how we measure success is still something I think that we need to discuss and chew on and think about. And what are we going to do next, right? And so that this leaves us to kind of the last portion, to really talk about what's next. Data is great. Anticipation as we move forward is something that, how do we ask for support? Finances and grants are always fantastic and helpful. When Judy and I were talking through this, I think the biggest thing is it's a pilot program. It's a humble program that we started with altruistic goals, and really thoughts about, hey, this is important and we want to engage our own small community. But what we're realizing is that there's such a need for this type of education. And so if we can have a larger footprint to teach other communities how to just do this practically speaking and implement in their own backyards, maybe teach other law schools how to lift something like this, it would be powerful to be part of that growth moment. And then equally analyzing the data is something that, again, like I said, we're not statisticians. And so we have the data, but we don't necessarily know how to analyze it. We can look back and kind of make some conclusions around it. And then we'd love to do some more assessment of figuring out, where do these students go? Are they making a powerful difference? And has our program somehow changed the trajectory?
Right. And I would say one other area that we could use more support in is actually identifying and recruiting students to participate in the program. As Chrissy said, we want to grow. We do need the funding in order to do that as well. But as we're growing, we also really want to expand our outreach as well.
I'm a big proponent of finding students who might not otherwise find our program. So
Right.
we know that there are foster children out there surfing on couches. We know that there are literally children in need, that, if we can give a
Right, who
moment
would
of
really benefit from learning about self-advocacy as well as systemic advocacy on the entire spectrum. We want to see a stronger youth group out there making change in the world.
I think that puts us right on time for questions and answers, Emery. And so I'll stop now. I'll stop sharing so we can collectively come back together.
Perfect.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful presentation. And so we do have about 15 minutes or so for questions and answers, and we're going to have sort of an open format. I know that there were a couple of questions that the registrants had before, one of which you all addressed with regards to how are we encouraging students to register to vote? And that came from the League of Women Voters. Don't know if you have any other comments related to that, or is there, any information that you share with students with regards to why it's so important to vote, maybe understanding some of the issues that are out there that they need to educate themselves around as they go to the polls? So I'll just open that up.
So I would say we don't necessarily focus on any particular issues that they need to know about, but we do talk to them about why voting is important in general and how it is connected to social change, right? So if they are saying, for example, gun control is an important issue to them, our access to healthcare is important to them, we will take what they say and give them examples from there, but we're not choosing any particular issue
Sure.
they should focus on, right? So they tell us what's of interest to us, and we explain how organizing and voting for public officials who support the outcome that they want is important to social change in general. And we do literally pull up the screen that shows them how they can register. We give them printed information on that as well, and we encourage them to register. And those students who have registered, we ask them to talk about the experience and share it with their classmates and really engage in a peer education aspect of why voting is important. Let them talk to each other about that as well. But I think the historical background that we give them on who was entitled to vote when this country was first founded, right? It was white, male, propertied men. And it took many, many years for women and non-white individuals to be able to vote. And even when we had the right to vote, there was a lot of violence and terror that was preventing people from actually accessing voting booths. And so we talked to them about that as well. We actually show a video clip of a documentary related to the massacre in Ocoee that was directly related to Black individuals wanting to exercise their right to vote. And I think that also has a major impact on their perspective on how important voting is. I really remember one student actually saying, well, it must be important if people responded in such a violent way to prevent us from voting.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, you're correct about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Important lesson, and also, the information that you provide around the role that students played during the civil rights movement, which was very, very, very important. So thank you. So we do have Mary Ellen from the
Yeah.
League of Women Voters. Yep.
Hi
You have a
there. Hi,
question?
everyone. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much. Hi, Professor Scully. We met at actually Center for Health Equity at that reentry experience program they did, because we do a lot of work with returning citizens. But the thing I was curious about today, Ingrid Bredenberg had actually informed me about this group, and I'm glad she did. But so we have a program that one of our volunteers created for high schools, and we do it a bit with the colleges. And I wanted to share that with you and just throw an idea out. The thing is, years ago, a group of volunteers went into one of the high schools, and basically the students practically ran the other way from seeing a bunch of older people sitting behind a desk telling them they needed to register to vote. And so Betsy Wells, who is one of my voter services co-chairs, came up with the idea because she had students of her own. Children of her own who were high school students at the time. She said, this needs to be peer-to-peer. This is not working to have us go in and do this. So what we have tried to do, and I'll tell you, it's been a slog for a number of reasons, getting into the high schools, we try to find a faculty who will serve as like an advocate or a member or a mentor, whether it be somebody in civics or in government or history or even a journalism professor, to talk to us about maybe students who would be involved in leading voter registration and voter education events in their own schools. And they often will pull from student government or from civics classes, et cetera. And what we do is they become student league members, which is free. Betsy conducts our training, which is very serious training that we do. They become certified to do voter registration. And then they set up their own events. They decide how they're going to do it. They decide when to do it. They decide how to promote it. Betsy or another one of our trained volunteers for voter registration go just to make sure everything's being done properly and handled if there's any questions, but we stay in the background. We're not the face of the event, and the students themselves lead the event. And we've had much better success with the numbers of students who register to vote during those because they are peer-to-peer. So two things I just wanted to mention about that is we've had a hard time getting into the high schools. And I think the reason is, first of all, the high school management, you want to call it, a lot of the time they say, oh, we don't need you guys because the supervisors of elections come a couple of times a year. Well, the supervisors of elections are grown-ups sitting behind a table telling people they need to register to vote, which was the exact problem that we found. You don't get that great of turnout. Now, I will say we've had conversations with people from the SOE who have figured out some ways to get students involved. And actually that does work better when they do that. But we really think that the schools are missing an opportunity to do this bigger peer-to-peer program that we're working on. So we're in the private schools, we're in Canterbury and Shorecrest. We are in St. Pete High. We've recently had, because we work on the South Side primarily with a lot of partners in the African-American community. So we've recently had some interest from high school students at Lakewood. We're trying desperately to get into Gibbs. And I think the part two of why it's been hard is that the educators are also overwhelmed. So they'll be excited about the concept when Betsy finally gets through to someone with a phone call or an email. But then it's really hard to ever just really do the follow-up and get the kids and train them, because they're just overwhelmed with teaching and all the issues going on in schools right now. And I'm not sure that there isn't some concern about bringing in a group, even though we are nonpartisan and well-respected in this area, but I'm not sure there isn't some concern about getting pushback on that as well. So I wanted to put those issues out there. But what I wondered was, I know your program is during the summer. Do you think, as part of like a continuing engagement, your students could ever be asked, as part of your advocacy program where you do talk about voting, to conduct a voter registration event in their schools when they get back to school? And like I said, I know it's a summer program, but I don't know, maybe this would be a way to continue having follow-up with the students. And it would be a way for them to be trained in doing voter registration, engage with their fellow students on doing it. I don't know, I just thought I'd throw that out there. And thank you so much for listening to all my blah, blah.
So yeah, I think it's possible. I am the woman of possibility, right? I always think it's possible. Let's see. We'd have to talk a little bit further about the details to see what that would look like. But one way that I could imagine that happening too is during the voting session or after the voting session, really talking about you know, the advocacy involved with registration, right? What that looks like and how they could be a part of that if they wanted to, and leaving it open for them to say, yeah, I am interested, or, you know, or that's not for me, whatever. But yes, I think introducing them to that idea is a definite possibility. I don't see that as controversial at all. Chrissy, do you agree?
No, I mean, I personally would love to design a course that actually our law school students would teach at high school, to assist high school teachers, right? And then like literally, so that they are somewhat peer-to-peer. And I know there's programs out there, Georgetown does it, Loyola does it, so it's possible. I also think that the Florida Bar, and I've participated in this years ago, but they have a civics education program where they go into the school for one day and teach in the high schools for one day. And there's usually pro bono attorneys who sign up for this, who believe in it. They earn pro bono hours. It's part of their continuing legal education. If there's a way to pair up on that day to do that outreach, I just think there's probably more outreach that you want to do, but that might be another avenue to get in because it's already preset with the Florida Bar.
Yeah, I mean, and if you want to take it slightly outside of the school system, but still focused on youth, I mean, we have several community centers where children are involved in a wide variety of activities where that type of a program that you're talking about, Mary Ellen, might be extremely welcome and embraced.
Yeah, thank you for
work with a
mentioning
number
that.
of youth groups. Jack and Jill, we just trained a lot of their young people to do this. But anyway, yeah, so perhaps we could continue this conversation separately. If maybe we could share contact information in the chat.
Sure.
And also, I would just like to say that the only college that we're not involved with on doing voter registration on campus is Stetson, and I would like to correct that as well. In fact, we're at 3 SPC campuses this week and USF doing voter reg drives. So I'd love to be able to do that stuff with you guys as well. Anyway, thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Thanks for what you
Are there other questions? Yeah, absolutely. The other, okay.
Yeah.
Is it Damon?
This was kind of touched on, but Mary Ellen, but I was curious if the program had received any kind of pushback from either electeds or any of those in the broader community who may inaccurately interpret civic education for youth as being advocacy on behalf of certain issues.
Are you asking us at Stetson whether we've had pushback? Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
No, we have not, not that I'm aware of anyhow. I'd have to say I am not aware of any.
Can we be specific?
That's good.
Yeah, can we be specific about certain issues? So I'm not sure if Damon, if you want to be specific on that, not to ask the question back. Uh, I'm a big proponent of allowing the discussion around certain issues to come up, and then if there is pushback, pushing back on the pushback, right? Because I think that having time and space for students to break down and figure out how they want to advocate, I think is important. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I wasn't thinking around any particular issues. I was just curious if there had been any, if the mere conversation that you all are not mere, but the fact that you're having this grand conversation and programming around civic education, I wondered if for some outside of understanding what the actual curriculum is, ever misinterpret civic education as being some sort of advocacy mechanism on behalf of particular party or particular issues or that kind of thing. That was more so the broader rubric of the question, not in regard to any particular issues. But
Well, so I can just tell you though, we had a moment of panic one year because Roe versus Wade had been overturned, and every student in that room wanted to talk about it. And we were like, oh boy, like, we are not quite prepared for this conversation. And we also knew that, part of what they wanted to talk about was sexuality and sexual health. And we were like, okay, so for us to delve into that, we would actually need your parental permission. We can't actually do that, but we'll talk about advocacy in general, right? So we did have a moment where it could have gotten quite political. And we kind of redirected the students to just think about how do you make change when something occurs that you feel is against your interest and the interest of your community.
okay.
So, the kids will bring it to us, like and then we have to kind of figure out how to maneuver around it in order to get the basic principles of civic engagement and advocacy, in order to teach them the basic principles rather than getting involved in the details of any particular issue.
Thank you.
Okay. Emery, I think we're about at the witching hour, and
Yes, we are.
yes. So I wanted to respond to Damon. Damon, we had a program in December on the future of civic education, and it got at the question of R&Ds, and that was a consensus approach that was presented, and one of our board members, Dennis Ross, participated in that panel. So I just want to let you know we're anticipating programs. We don't have them yet scheduled. We'll schedule them and let you know. We're hoping to do another youth program in the spring from the Tampa Bay area. And also we are hoping to do a program on Table Talk, which is a Central Florida Foundation effort to bring the community together and then inform their grant making by the conversations that take place in this sequence of the what they call Table Talk. So very much appreciate both Judy and Chrissy's presentation. Learned a lot. Thank you, Emery, for moderating the panel. And I will just say that we are a membership organization, and if you are interested at all in becoming a member, I would both encourage that, and I'd be happy to provide you with information on that. And this is our website is up. We have we recently presented on the website the FCA summit that took place in St. Petersburg in October. So we have all the videos up and slides, et cetera. So I encourage you to kind of take a look at that. And again, thank you. For the participants and the registrants and the speakers. I really appreciate it. And I think we will get this up on the website and let everyone know, especially those who had participated in the youth engagement seminars that we did with 4-H and then with YMCA, to kind of take a look at this and I think to try and facilitate any partnership discussions over time, as well as kind of reflect on the characteristics of your program and how they might look at some possibilities for their programming as well. So, Emery, I think we are ready to adjourn. Thank you again so much, and appreciate it. I'll let you know as soon as we schedule the next. It'll probably be in March and April and May, but I'll send out word on that. So thanks.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you both. We appreciate it.
care.
Thank you.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right.